Ah, the humble plain slime. A simple creature that often hunts wild animals and attacks humans, often hunting in groups of 3. The only problem they face today
is that they're fucking stupid, so let's change that.
But first, I need to finish up those menus I started at the end of the last devlog. The first issue I faced was this one frame flicker. It took some light rewriting of the code, but it worked itself out in the end. Now, when you run up to an enemy, you have Blizzard as your first magic attack. But if you go to one of these, look at that, now it's Incinerate. I also had to go through all of these and change the added X variable to be set by the magic parent. And I want to shoot whoever decided to give each one their own added X value instead of using the parent. Wait. Although the basics of it are finished, I still have to improve the attack selector. The first thing I added was this bar that tells you if you've selected the attack, and if you try to select an attack you've already selected, you can't. Then whilst doing some testing, I noticed that when you use a magic attack, you don't lose any MP, which is something that isn't meant to happen, and it turns out the reason this was happening is that I was multiplying the cost of the magic attack by 0, and for my preschool friends on their parents' accounts, I know you're out there, that equals 0. So I just added 1, and look at that, MP gets drained now. Then I realized why I had the dead array save the position, the rotator, because if you go to the end with a dead enemy, everything's messed up. So I made a new array and rewrote some code, and it's working again.
Now, when I published my last devlog, I was at about 280 subscribers. Since then, I've gotten 64 more, and I'm currently at 344 subscribers. So I set a new goal of 500 subscribers. Knowing me, I'll reach that by the time I've edited this video. So make sure to subscribe, and back to the content.
Now let's finally get to the title of the video, making the enemy not stupid. The first issue that I decided to fix was letting them do all attacks, because right now if they pick one, it's just another single attack. But that just means I need to rewrite this bit of code here instead of the whole thing. I stole the all attack code from the battle manager and made some adjustments. Would you look at that? Everyone takes damage respected to their resistance, which is currently 1 for everyone because I haven't coded that in yet. And it was around here that I decided to give each character their own unique weapon instead of having them share their weapon with another character. Farmer gets a pitchfork, the soldier has an axe, the royal guard has a sword, the chef has a frying pan, the traveler gets a spear, pretty much a pitchfork, but shut up. Musician has a musical instrument, which will be a club. But I was having some trouble deciding what to give the mercenary and the thief. My initial solution was to kill the thief and give the dagger to the mercenary and introduce a new character, the ranger. But then I just decided to give the mercenary a longsword instead, so now we've got 10 party members and a bonus element to code in, which turns fire and ice into another scissors, paper, rock type thing. And the reason why I kept the ranger instead of killing him off, I want bow and arrows. Then I needed to fix another problem from changing the dead array. I'm starting to see why I should have just made a new array. The party can attack dead enemies, which isn't a very sound strategy. I rewrote the code a bit and decided to improve the way a new enemy is selected when one dies. It checks if there are any other enemies of the same type and attacks them. If not, they just defend. This way, if you attack with fire and one enemy absorbs fire, you don't accidentally regenerate half of its health. I also decided to add a small transition between the overworld and the battle. This curtain drops down, the room changes, and the battle begins. It's a bit choppy, so I need to make more frames to make it smoother, but it works for the time being, and it does look pretty nice. Hey, don't you think now's a pretty good time to get back to making the enemy AI? Yeah, me too, so let's get on to that. Now this thing isn't 100% completed yet. The remaining code is just copy and pasting this bit though, and making single letter or number adjustments. So, to me, it's done. First, the enemy checks if they have a buff as a skill. If they do, they run a 1 in 10 chance to use a buff. There may be a problem, I'll get to that later, but if that 1 in chance wins, it chooses a random buff and applies that to a randomly chosen enemy. That was the easy part of the new AI. Now let's get to the difficult part, getting the enemies to attack. Now the vast majority of this code was selecting in attacks, and doing the attacking was already completed back in the first week. First, I put in about 50 variables in the battle manager that give the enemies the data about the resistances that they know about for each of the party members. They're automatically set to 10 because I chose that, and when they attack the enemy, they get the resistance from them. Now let's get into how it decides the attack. First, it chooses a random party member as the target. I decided to do it this way just to reduce the amount of stuff I have to do. It then goes through its attacks list and compares the types of attacks it has to the known resistance of the party member it chose. It adds the attacks that work to an array. Once it has a complete list of the attacks that could or will work, they attack, updating the variable in Battle Manager to the found out variable. This would be good on its own, but it also allows for some strategy with the increased resistance skills I have in the works, as you could apply one of them to a party member who may be neutral to a certain type of attack, and the slimes won't use that type of attack because it's ineffective. Keep in mind, these guys are stupid. The way they decide what attacks are in the list is simple. If the known resistance is 1 or higher, which implies more damage, for magic attacks, they will have that as an option. And if the physical resistance is more than 0, their basic attack will always be an option for them.
And this is where the potential problem lies. You see, let's say that the farmer knows physical and ice attacks, and the slime has physical and ice attacks. Instead of coding some elaborate stuff saying it'll do this and that, I'm just going to copy Persona again and add some text at the top that says slime thinks or whatever.
Something else that I unintentionally did was make it easier to add or remove attacks. So if I want to give more difficult enemies more attacks, or only give some enemies a few attacks, it's just a case of Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and boom. I can now have 17 attacks instead of 3. Then there was what took up most of the final day of this devlog. Occasionally enemies would just stop attacking. They go through the first few terms, then just stop, and I spent a good while trying to fix this. So let's go over what I changed whilst getting this to work. Green screen me?
Certainly. At first I thought it might be a problem with this code here, so I removed it. But the problem still persisted. Sure, when I loaded it up, the second slime did the attack. Then the third slime forgot its attack, so back to the drawing board. Next, I thought it might be something to do with the attack dealing aspect of it. After all, they were starting to get critical attacks with magic attacks, and that doesn't happen. So I rewrote the code so that it actually reflects what's happened, and they still miss attacks. But the attacking is good now. Then after doing a bit of testing, I realized that the problem was that they weren't going back from enemy target. This meant that they would try to target the enemy with a attack, and that just broke the code because there's nothing in there for them to do that, which is why they just stood there and the attack registered. So I fixed that up. It was one line of code, and yet game developers don't know what they're doing. Now sure, that might not be the problem, but if your battle lasts more than 50 turns, that's just a skill issue, man. Get good.